Rahim. Dear students, welcome once again. You are again looking at me to have a summary of the previous lecture. It is very necessary as it links the previous things to the current ones, and it is also reminds you, I know you are your memory is very fast in some other activities like mobile phones and Facebook, and very sorry to say, but at the same time you are now also a good public administrator, and you should be for this. So I would like to start from the summary of the previous lecture. Very interesting topic we have started. If you remember, we talked about the whole history of the devolution plan, and I would like to give you some of the crux of that discussion, that what result we have concluded from there. The fundamental result was that there was never a true shifting or transfer of authority from central to the local level government. Although the provincial authorities was given to the local bodies, otherwise center never surrender any of its rights to the local government. The other thing is that the financial liability or the financial space or the financial independence was very low in these local body elections. But at the same time, there was good things that for the first time in the new devolution plan of Musharraf, that the bureaucracy was held responsible to present their reports before the elected members. So it is a mixture of the goods and bads like any previous one, and at the basis of our total discussion we were in a position to give some of the suggestion. The first suggestion is that the authorities should be shifted in a true manner. It should not be in such a way that on paper it is true but reality is the other. The other thing is that the financial and the budgetary independence is utmost and extremely important. Without this, the true spirit of local bodies election cannot be achieved. At the same time, it is suggestive for the political government that they should take initiative to form the local bodies governments, so that the people get their rights at the grassroots level, and this will even strengthen their roots into the people. After this, we just have a touch to the problem of governance in Pakistan. That is the most critical. Even a child or a shopkeeper that is in the remote rural areas, he can give a comprehensive talk with strong arguments that over the years the governance in Pakistan has been not up to the marks. If you talk with a person of the age more than 70 or around about 80, you will see he will give you the total history of what happened, what were the consequences of this, if he has some of the political linkage or the political interest over the years. One thing is common, that this is that the problem of governance is significantly needed in Pakistan, because there is bad governance. Our national institutions are running in losses that we cannot afford, and we are giving billions of rupees in subsidies to just survive these institutions. At one time, these institutions were giving back profits to the state, but unfortunately this is not the situation right now. The governor of the problem of the governor is not due to only one factor. There are multidimensional, multifaceted factors that have ultimately led towards the problem of governance. And one very important topic that looks at a totally independent of this problem, but that is the core of this problem, that is the economic development. Because economic development looks like a pure economic phenomena, yet it has strong inter-roots connected with the problem of governance, and we will see that how over the years the state apparatus, the military and the bureaucracy ultimately dominated the political regime, and thanks gods, thanks to the political will of the people, that again the situation is reversing and the violence is going down in favor of the political government, and it is prayed and supposed and hoped that this situation will continue. And we will start from the first factor, that is the economic growth, social polarization and state power. We will link these three things, that at one stage there was the economic development, at the same time there was social polarization. It means there was some defective development. It was not a comprehensive or inclusive growth that should have been, and there was state power. When there is a mechanism within the system, the state power is also dependent upon this. If this changes, the things that are standing on it, they also are supposed to change. If I remember in the previous lecture, I finished with the slide that the inception of Pakistan, there was a Gatjod, there was a milli-bhagat between the landlords and the industrialists. They were at the front, and the military and bureaucracy was fully supporting them. Both have interest with each other, and ultimately they kept their interest alive, and the nation and the population went behind the scene, and that has to suffer. So we still go on this discussion, and we will discuss this phenomenon in detail, because when the people discuss the economic development, they think that it is not linked with the public administration or the state or the political science, or you can say the political will, public policy. Economic growth was of a kind that brought affluence to the few at the expense of the many. So if we see the economic growth over the year, we can see that there was enough growth, or you can say the satisfactory growth over the year. For example, if you start from the 1950, or particularly from the 1960 of the era of Ayub Khan, there was massive growth, particularly in the agriculture sector, and that's continued with fluctuation over the time. But what gained from the poor, or you can say the most deprived people from this, and what this means, the growth, the economic development was in such a manner that the few people became more and more rich, affluence at the expense of the many. It is definite when there are, if resources are gathering in my pocket, definitely these resources are coming from other pockets where they should be there. So the first general conclusion about the growth is that it only benefited the already rich. And if we started from the landlord and the agriculturist, indirectly I am saying that these two major segments were the more beneficiaries of the economic development over the 66 years of Pakistan, and the poor population could not get its true fruits of economic growth. On average, you can't say that there has been low economic growth, yet it is clear that this growth could not be delivered towards the population. Many factors like ये क्यों हुआ, there are a number of factors that you know for this. The first is the gradual erosion of social infrastructure. The social infrastructure gradually went under erosion, because there was not a specific attention given or focus towards this social infrastructure, and over the year, rather than building it up, it went under erosion and deterioration, and it was one of the fundamental reasons that the only infrastructure was established that helped the rich people to become more rich. Endemic poverty, the widespread poverty was there. We can see that if we see the history of Pakistan growth, we see that the poverty has increased over some period from 1962 up to 1992 or 3. There was a decline in the poverty, but in real sense, these are the only facts and figures, but in real sense, I have the courage to say that the poverty remain endemic, and it was a wide spread for this. Despite growth, this is a very, very huge puzzle, or the complex puzzle, that at the one side our growth is increasing, satisfactory growth, but on the other side poverty is also increasing. There should have been the negative relationship between this, but we have seen a very complex phenomena that the economic growth went up and at the same poverty went up. It means there was the misallocation of the resources, imbalance of the distribution of wealth, and what were this we will see soon. Growing inequality between the regions undermined the civil society. Ultimately, we have to discuss that how the civil society was being hit by this inequality, or the affluence of the few people. Growing inequality between the regions undermined the civil society. Civil society is the ultimate loser on all of these dramas or films or movies or whatsoever for this, because they do not get from this. The other achievers become more and more powerful, which accelerated the trend towards militarization. The military is a power that just keeps like gazing on the power. And as it gets the opportunity, although it creates by making some of the scenario from behind the scene, but as it gets any of the vacuum and any of the system, the gap between this, it is a very good time for it to intervene there. It is never sleeping. It just, particularly in case of Pakistan, it has always the very, you can see the greedy eyes on the authority, or you can say the iqtidar of sovereignty of the Pakistan. And while the average annual growth rate of GNP fluctuated during different regimes, the overall trend of growing poverty, I have just explained this phenomena, that due to this, that the GNP and GDP, I will explain, although there is a difference between this and that, but I will be taking it as the GDP also, so I will be using it interchangeably. You need not to confuse this, but keep in mind that there is a significant and huge difference between the GNP and the GDP. And I am not interested to explain it here. During, now I am going by era by era, or you can say period by day. During the Ayub period from 1958 to 69, the basic objective of the development strategy was to achieve high growth rate of GNP. The Ayub team was only concentrating on that the country's GDP should grow at a higher speed. They did not give attention towards the equal distribution of the resources. What was their concept? It was called the trickle-down theory. They were thinking that if there is a massive investment at the higher level, ultimately it will trickle down to the its benefit will trickle down towards the poor population or the grassroots level. But it is true in the sense that the people got benefit that were already rich from this. GNP growth were impressive at that time, but the second part of the phenomena remained unmaterialized. What was the reason for this? There was many other factors that contributed to this one. How government tried to keep this high growth rate of GNP, supported by government subsidies, tax concessions, and import controls. So how government supported this high growth? Government just concentrated on the high growth. What was this? Government was giving subsidies to the many of the sectors that were contributing significantly towards the GNP, or the gross domestic national product, or GDP, gross domestic product. The agriculture was the leading from the front. There was a green revolution, enormous agriculture development happened in that area. And there was tax concessions also. Definitely when you want to grow rapidly, you will have to incentivize the people who want to invest. If you will discourage those people, they will not come into the scene field, and they will not invest. Ultimately, unemployment will increase, and the savings rate will decrease, and there will be no further investment. So the government and also government put some control over the imports, and this situation continue because the objective of this 60 to 70 era was just focused on the higher level of economic growth, and that was achieved, and it means they were true, they were happy and they were fortunate to achieve their objective. But at the same time, the major factor went under the scene that created polarization that is very, very dangerous for the society. Investment targets were expected to be achieved on the basis of functional inequality. उन लोगों को पता था कि there is increasing the income inequality, but again there was a concept of the trickle down. They were thinking that the investment target, high, massive and large investment should be there so that these targets could be achieved, and they were that on the basis of functional inequality. They were ignoring that if for this time being there is some inequality, it is not a matter of concern, but at the same time there should be higher growth. So we will see that what happened. This meant a deliberate transfer of income from the poorer section of society. When you allow the wealth to concentrate with the wealthy people, it means you are just keeping your eyes closed and you are allowing the flow of wealth from the poor segment of the society to the already rich people. It was just ignored, and it was ignored that due to the phenomena of the higher growth. वो जो है वो हुकूमत का ख्वाब पूरा हो गया. Now we see that why this was allowed. Because it was just if and the income is flowing from the poor to the rich, it should flow from the rich to the poor. Any system, no doubt there is problem with the system, that the capitalism, socialism, communism, Islamic, every system wants that there should be the flow of the wealth, flow of the money from the rich people to the poor people. But this was happening, and the government was just keep quiet to see as an umpire. Poor, it was supposed that the poor low marginal rate of saving, rich high marginal rate of saving. It was supposed, and it was true, it was supposed and it is true, that the poor has low marginal rate of saving. It means they save less as compared to the rich people who has higher marginal rate of saving. So it was assumed, it was theoretically true, but at the same time what happened? The target was to increase total domestic saving, and hence investment could be raised. इसका मकसद क्या था? That the target was to increase total domestic saving, and when there was total increase in the total domestic saving, definitely, ultimately and consequently there should be increase in the total investment. That is very necessary for any of the economy. However, during the decades of the 60s, the policy failed to significantly increase saving. वो बात theoretically true थी, but what happened? There was not increase in the savings as it was accepted theoretically before launching this policy of high growth. So it totally failed, and there was not significant, or you can say a boom in the saving. Thereby what happened? Obliging the government to increase its reliance on foreign aid in order to meet its ambitious growth targets. Definitely government had ambitious growth targets, and how to achieve this? First was assumed that the domestic saving will plug this investment, will fulfill this investment, but what happened? This could not be achieved, and when it could not be achieved, definitely the government has to see the other third force, and that was the foreign aid. And from that time, that was the very, very dangerous time for us, very critical time for us. Since then we are under you can say the clouds of the aid or loans or whatsoever, and this scenario does not seems to seems to be end in the near future. So the government immediately went to have aid from the donor agencies or the donor countries. The particular growth process in Pakistan during this period generated 4 fundamental contradictions. If we see, now we are talking about the 60s, that during this generation period, the economic growth generated at least 4 fundamental contradictions that were not supposed to be done, And as there are contradictions, as there is imbalanced economic growth, there is polarization of the society, there is change in the power mechanisms, and there is definitely pressure on the particularly the political government. First was, what was this contradiction? A dependent economic structure and growing inflow of loans. क्या हो गया? हम चाहते क्या थे? Just to repeat the again thing, we wanted, the government was very ambitious about the higher growth rate, but what happened? The growth rate and it was supposed to achieved on the basis of the high saving rate. That's why it was allowed the income to flow from the poor to the rich people, having supposed that they have the higher marginal rate of saving, but it doesn't happen. So first contradiction came when there was dependent economic structure rather than the independent. That was the true objective. What happened? And growing inflow of foreign loans. Definitely, as in the previous slide, we have seen that the government has to see some other sources that were the foreign loans. And what was the situation of foreign loans? I have just quoted one of the figure. The loans increased from US dollar 373 million between 50 to 55 to US 2701 million up to 1970. If we take the extreme here, from 55 to 70 during these 15 years, from 3 to almost 9 time increase in the loans. So it was a flawed policy. The second contradiction was an acute concentration of economic power, not the administrative power, an acute concentration of economic power. चंद हाथों में जो है वो दौलत चली गई. And look at the figures that are the eye opener. 43 families represented almost 77% of all manufacturing assets by the end of the 1960s. जो तमाम manufacturing assets थे, almost 77 of there was just in the hand of 43 families. So how massive there was the concentration of wealth. So this massive concentration of wealth put a very bad consequences on the society. And the third was, what was the third contradiction of this? The polarization of classes in the rural sector and a rapid increase in the landless. Look at this, it is again a puzzle, and the historical history says that there was massive agriculture growth, but at the same time many people became landlessness. So how this can be justified? This is justified, as we can see, that it means the only big landlords were the most beneficiary of this. So it created again the polarization of in the rural sector. Rural sector में क्या हुआ? There was huge gap between the haves and have-not. The big landlords became more rich, and they bought back the lands from the poor people, and the poor people became landless. So the agriculture, the green revolution again could not deliver to the poor. For example, what happened? Income of the rural elite increased sharply. Rural elite means that the people that were the big landlords, not like you and me people. Hopefully you may be, but I am sure I am not the rural elite, although I have a background from the rural. In green revolution, the real incomes of the rural population declines in absolute terms. Absolutely difficult to explain. Everything is going well in the agriculture sector. It is growing, and the incomes of elite people are increasing, but at the same time the real incomes of the rural poor declined in absolute one. So it is also one of the source or the contradiction of this economic development phenomena, that there was imbalances, there was higher gaps between haves and have-not, and ultimately what happened, we will see that at one stage these haves and have-nots were standing in front of each other. Similarly, during 1960s, as many as small farmers became landless laborer. Look at the number. This is not a small number. This is 7,94,042. So in these 10 years, the people who became liberal from the landowners was such a high. It means there was a hammering, or the policy was so biased, negatively biased to the rural poor people, that they have to quit, and they were the more sufferer of this. And what was the last contradiction of this? Economic disparity between the regions of Pakistan increased significantly. Economic disparity between the regions of Pakistan, big disparity, particularly the southern Punjab and the eastern Punjab. There was huge this kind of disparity. Rural, particularly, rather than saying this, rural or urban divide was there, huge rural and urban divide that we will see. These were four major contradictions that were in total contrast of the previously documented theory, that was the high growth. These consequences of the economic growth process during the U period generated explosive political tensions. We are not talking about the history or the Ram Kahani of this or that. We want to link it, that how there was the polarization, how tension created, how military had the way to come in, and how the bureaucracy enjoyed the whole history of Pakistan. So what this happened, as you have seen the very alarming figures, or astonishing figures, surprising figures, that there was huge difference between haves and have-not, and it was kept deliberately, just keeping. There was the economist, I think at that time they may be true, that were giving the philosophy that we should invest in the heavy and make heavy investment at higher level, and there will be trickle down. That ultimately not happened. So what happened? There was generated explosive political tension. These tensions started right in the before 70s, and what was the consequences? Hold your hand, hold your heart, and see what was, which not only overthrew the Ayub government. This is not the alarming, bringing Yahya Khan's martial law, but but also fueled the secessionist movement in East Pakistan, which ultimately resulted in the formation of Bangladesh. ये होते हैं consequences जब आपकी economic development. Now I think you have understood that the economic development is a fundamental tool. If you want to keep the people quiet and happy, peacefully, you will have to deliver across the board equally. If you will not do this, I think the 90% reason behind the fall of Dhaka, in my opinion, is the imbalance between the economic development between East Pakistan and the West Pakistan. Most heavy machineries were in the West Pakistan, and we treated those people that they were not given, I think, indirectly the true status of a Pakistani. That part was seen as you can say, the inferior part of the Pakistan. At the same time, the Ayub Khan has to pay his price of his policies. When there was huge explosive political tension, it was a time was Bhutto to emerge on the scene of the Pakistani political landscape that was unique in the sense that he was the only man who led from the front and had the ability to take to the nation to the heights that the nature did not allow him. I don't know what was his ambition, and who were the powerful hands that allow the military to hang such a popular prime minister. What happened is, after this, the Yahya Khan's martial law came, and the most significant was the fall of Dhaka, that is the creation of Bangladesh. Economic growth and social polarization topic continues. During the Bhutto period, economic growth slowed down sharply. It is very interesting. The people are very fond of Bhutto, and he has a very, you can say, deep roots in all, particularly the poor people. But at the same time, economically, we see that in his era, from 1972 to 1977, in the 5 or 6 years, the economic growth was too slow. Many reasons behind this, that there was new Pakistan. He was just going through a new phase. But whatever the reason was, we have to see that how the economic growth went in this way, and that was a very, very slow economic growth in this. Industrial growth, and look at some of the figure. Industrial growth fell from an average of 13%. It means before the assuming charge of the Bhutto, the industrial growth was 13%, a mess, that is the massive growth during the 60s, to only 3% during the period. It means there was 75% decline in the industrial growth. That's why the industrialists are always against the Bhutto phenomena or the Bhutto ideology. However, we are now looking through the figures that are speaking. This can speak loudly. We can't ignore, despite many of his charismatic qualities, he was poor in performing the economic development for this. At the same time, what happened? Nationalization of banks and credit expansion for financing loans to capitalist farmers and industrialists led to heavy deficit and increase in the money supply. What happened in the one of the major drawback of the Bhutto regime is that the inflation. Why this inflation occurred? Many reasons behind this, but 2 or 3 are the biggest. One is when the nationalization of banks came, and the government politically gave credits to the big landlords, capitalist farmers and the industrialists. For that, the government have to face, or you can say, led to heavy deficits and increase in the money supply. How the government started to fulfill these deficits? They just concentrated on keeping the money supply, and it is a very basic phenomena for an economic student that as there is increase in the money supply, ceteris paribus, there is increase in the inflation. And one of the major cause of the fall of Bhutto regime was the inflation. The political or the opposition parties exploited this fact enormously, and ultimately the military was able to send Bhutto out of the role. Although nationalization of industries enabled the PP to acquire the support of a section of the people, licenses, jobs, loan. PP ने भी अपना, भुट्टो साहब ने भी ये जो है वो अपना काम किया. When there was a nationalization, when these banks were making some of the you can say not properly delivering the funds to the different segment of the society, this nationalization of industries give PP to get more power and acquire the support of a section of PP ने क्या इसमें किया? लाइसेंस लोगों को जारी किए, the jobs were given, loans were also provided to the people. So it was indirectly a way to attract the voters for the next election. Yet the lower middle class that did not gain from the PP suffered an absolute decline in their real income. ये सारी लूट मार कहाँ हो रही थी? It was just at higher level, that there was nationalization, the people were getting some of the jobs, loans, licensing, whatsoever. The lower middle class was not getting benefit from this, so he has to suffer owing to the high inflation rate. Inflation तो उस वजह से आ गया. Definitely when there was high flow of credit by printing of money, it has ultimate effect on the money, on the inflation rate. So the lower middle class was more affected from this aspects of Bhutto. Economic growth and social phenomena still continues. It was his frustrated that responded to the call for street agitation in March 1976. That was the movement Pakistan National Alliance, PNA, very big alliance in the history of Pakistan, that overthrew the most popular prime minister. So what was the reason behind this? This inflation, it was one of the reasons that the people joined the agitation against Bhutto, and they were true in the sense because their real income was decreasing as the inflation was increasing at a very higher speed. If we see some of the figures that what was the rates of some of the things before the start of Bhutto regime, and after that there is a massive increase, and definitely the Bhutto has to pay the price for this. Although the apparent form of the street agitation was spontaneous, इसके और भी जो है वो कई वजूहात थी, and the major reason was this, that was the economic reason. However, one hidden reason was that the Zia-ul-Haq at that time, who was very clever and cunning in formulating, he was behaving in a such way that he was also showing Bhutto that he is faithful to him, and at the same time he was very popular among the opposition parties, Pakistan National Alliance. It was orchestrated and given political focus at key junctures of the movement. इसको बाद में जो है वो पॉलिटिकल फोकस जो है वो मिलता गया नेशनल पार्टीज को. ज़िया ने अपोजिशन पार्टीज वर प्रॉमिस्ड बाय ज़िया informally that they will get the power when the Bhutto will be out of the power. Definitely they will be given the share into the power, but unfortunately that didn't happen, and Zia overwhelmingly and like a single man ruled this country like a king for the 11 years. This organizational and coordination function was performed by trained cadres of the Jamaat-e-Islami, allegedly with support from the US. ये सारा ड्रामा जो इतने बड़े बड़े आप जो सामने आ रहे थे भुट्टो के, the Jamaat-e-Islami was also at the forefront of this. The Mufti Mahmood and the Maulana Maududi and the other people, they were at the forefront of this situation. And how they were supported? They were the United States. And now you can see that every time Jamaat-e-Islami makes slogan against the United States. So at that time they were being supported because the United States was extremely against the Bhutto, because the Henry Kissinger publicly said that they will make the Bhutto a symbol of horror for the other people. Maqam-e ibrat bana denge, and they were true in their sense that using the military, using the Jamaat-e-Islami, using many other forces, they were ultimately in a position to hang the Bhutto. The agitation was of course fueled by the fact that the PP was alleged to have rigged election in a number of constitutions. This is 100% correct. No doubt the Bhutto tried to rig the polls, जिसको जुर्लू भी आप कहते हैं, जुर्लू फेरने की कोशिश की in some of the constituencies, but it was not such a situation that there should be huge agitation against it. The problem could be solved by negotiation, and if I am true, at the 11th hour Bhutto was ready to negotiate with the opposition party, but at that time Zia has finalized his program to take over, and that was not materialized. Bhutto became agree to have negotiation, and there I remember there were some of the negotiation talks that were ultimately not succeeded, and Bhutto was even ready to dissolve the assembly and to go into the re-election. But ultimately, you can see in many of the factors, whenever there is a negotiation between the Taliban or the other Taliban or the government or the India and Pakistan, there are some hidden forces that do not allow this to happen. So until and unless those hidden forces are powerful, the situation will remain the same. The overthrow of the Bhutto regime represented the limits of populism within a state structure dominated the military and the bureaucracy. Bhutto's overthrow, removal from the scene, was a significant message from the military and the bureaucracy that who is the real powerful stakeholder in Pakistan, whether it is the public or it is the military. And definitely it was decided, no, public, although the public was on the beck and call of the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, but ultimately Zia's brutalities played havoc with the nation, that created many distortions in the society. But however, it was one of the major and significant and clear signals to the masses that the ultimate power lies with the military or the bureaucracy. Now we start another topic, that is the fragmentation of civil society. Economic growth जो है वो हमने इसमें जो है वो कर ली, अभी इसका जो है वो पहला हमने पार्ट कंप्लीट किया. What we are discussing, the problem of governance in Pakistan, the people and the military, bureaucracy and the people. So we have just seen one of the factor, that was the economic growth and social polarization, and now we are going into the second phase, that is the fragmentation of civil society. कि जो यकजान society थी, how it came so fragmented or polarized over the year. Each regime that came into power sought to legitimate itself through an explicit idea. Each regime have different power, or you can say different ideologies to legitimize their rulership or their rule over the country. What from the first one, Ayub propounded the ideology of modernization and economic development. What was his idea? That there should be economic development and there should be the modernization. So this was his legitimacy to just prolong his rule. The Bhutto regime sought legitimacy in the ideology of food, culture, clothing and shelter for all. Bhutto का ये नारा सब लोग जानते हैं कि रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान, and that gained much popularity among the people. Although he could not fulfill his promise, but at the same time the slogan was very basic, and he was committed to provide these shelter, and he had the potential, but unfortunately he could not survive to fulfill his end. And I am not sure whether he was alive. He should have done then, although I can see with the confidence that he has the potential, but still there are so many factors that even a person sitting on a seat, we can say that he is a potential honest and sincere person, but we can see that he can deliver over time. What was the Zia's methodology? Zia initially sought justification of his government precisely in temporary character 90 days. Zia was very simple. He said, okay, in 90 days we will conduct the election. जो है वो इक़्तिदार आवाम के नुमाइंदों के हवाले जो है वो कर दिया जाएगा. Just he made promise of 90 days, but these 90 days went even more than the 9 years, and the Pakistani people have to see this. The fragmentation of the society topics continues. It was this fear that impelled him to hang the Bhutto. The Zia was very fear from Bhutto, and there was publicly there are statements from the Bhutto that were surely against the military, and he was challenging or you can say calling for the competition to the military, and definitely military has the background support from the many of the opposition party, Jamaat-e-Islami, PNA and the US also. So definitely Bhutto could not find this position. He could not guess the idea. No doubt he was true that when he was going into the public meetings, there was a massive crowds that used to come to see listen Bhutto, but at the same time the real power still lies with the army that Bhutto could not fight, and that's why he has to sacrifice his life. It was the same fear that subsequently induced Zia to rule on the basis of military terror. ज़िया ने 90 दिन के बाद ये क्या किया कि उसने ये क्या कि मिलिट्री टेरर इस तरह फैला दी जाए कि कोई बात जो है वो ना करे. You can't imagine. I am sure you have the births in not later than before than the 85, but you can't imagine what was a horrible scene of that period. And fortunately I have my childhood of that era. In 1988 I was about 15 or 16 years, and you were definitely, I think you were not born at that time. So this was a very, you can say the closed era. Nothing was clear. Every person was feeling fear, threatening other. This Maulvi जो है वो culture, religionization, it was on the peak. There was ethnic crisis. Many things were heroin, Kalashnikov culture, the Afghan refugees, kidnapping the childs from different part of the Pakistan. So nothing was clear about this. But Zia was sitting like a king, and he was dominating the people. At the higher level, he has the umbrella, but under the deterioration of the society was so that though the people were fearful from the brutalities and injustices of the army that played with its nation of Pakistan, ultimately they ended in, while propounding a version of Islamic ideology. Zia ने एक और लुबादा जो है वो बड़ा दिलचस्प पढ़ा. He said that he want to bring Islamic ideology, Islamic system to the Pakistan. And I remember his referendum in which only the one question was that whether you want Islamization in Pakistan or not. And when there was a massive majority in the favor, or definitely in a Muslim country, that they want the Islamization, so Zia said, okay, it means you are electing me, that I am going to start the Islamic ideology. And this was a very complex system of this. He's tried this. His motives were other, his vested interest were other, but he threw the country into the fire that is still, you can say, and the fire, it is still alive, and you can see in different occasions, like in Rawalpindi just a few days back on the Muharram al-Haram, what happened. These have all roots linked towards the this Islamic ideology that was so-called Islamic ideology, not the true ideology. Islamic has the tolerance message all over the world. Islam doesn't allow for this. It asks to respect the rights of the other and even sacrifice your obligations. But this was the so-called ideology imposed by Ziaul Haq. Draconian measures of military courts, the PP leaders and the PP supporters has to gone through a very critical role, and they were उन्हें कोड़े जो है वो मारे गए, उनको नाकाबिले यकीन जो है वो दी गई, सजाएं दी गई, and arbitrary arrest. Even when there was, he wanted to, Zia wanted to terrorize the people by the military, and the people used to say, I remember I have some of the, you can say the the बाज़गाश्त मेरे कानों में जो है वो आ रही है. Then people used to, when we used to play some in open area, people used to play that the army will come and pick you up. This I remember at that time. So there was so horror that without any reason the army was allowed to pick the people, and that was the arbitrary arrest. And most of the time these were 99%, these were the arrest of the people who used to speak against the Zia, and definitely those were the people from Pakistan People Party. And public lashing were introduced. सरेआम कोड़े जो है वो मारे जाते. ज़िया वाह करवाने के जो है वो बड़े मूड में होते थे जो है वो उन्होंने जो है, I remember that in one of the gang rapes in Faisalabad, he publicly asked the people कि उनको जो है वो कोड़े मारे जाएं, and that's why the people were so impressed by that. But अंदरूनी खाना जो वो कर रहा था, just we will see that how the fragmentation of the civil society has to go through during the regime of Mr. Zia. Thus the gradual erosion, ये ऊपर से काम चलता रहा, लावा अंदर ही अंदर पकता रहा. जब आप किसी को forcefully दबाओगे, even I forcefully suppress you or you suppress me, for the time being I may be you can say depressed or suppressed, but ultimately I will bounce back, and there will be massive explosion for this. Thus the gradual erosion of the institution of civil society brought the power of the state into confrontation with the people. हुआ क्या फिर? ये जो है वो इसका सारी डिस्कशन का निचोड़ और क्रक्स ये है कि इसमें फिर हुआ क्या कि अल्टीमेटली कौन आमने सामने आ गया? द सिविल सोसाइटी ब्रॉट द पावर ऑफ द स्टेट इनटू कन्फ्रंटेशन विद द पीपल। लोग आमने सामने आ गए, जो है वो इस जो है वो जुल्म के खिलाफ लोगों ने जो है आवाज़ जो है वो उठानी शुरू की। सो दैट्स वाई दिस वाज द ह्यूज पोलराइजेशन। जस्ट हैव वन फर्दर लुक एट व्हाट हैपेंड देयर। Earlier in 71, this confrontation had been a major factor in the break of Pakistan. हम तजर्बात से नहीं सीखते. Every time we make new experiment, and the new experiment that is being played in the Balochistan, that the missing person and the target killing and the bullet riddled bodies of the Balochs and the killing of the Nawab Akbar Bugti, these are some of the we should learn lesson from these, and ultimately we will have to face when the Akbar Bugti was killed. There is a significant fragmentation of the society, and when the society and the state becomes amne samne aate hain, then there is havoc, and every should be fair from that time, and we hope that this time never comes in the history of Pakistan again. It only happened in the 1971 when there was half of the portion of this the largest Islamic state of Pakistan was broken into the parts. Now a protracted period of martial law under the Zia regime served to brutalize and undermine civil society. Civil society की तो उसने खाल उतार दी. सिविल सोसाइटी को जो है वो मज़हब के नाम पर उसको जो है वो और नाम अखलाकियात ये सो कॉल्ड. I don't say that there should not be the Islamic concept of this, but that was not the true concept. It was just the concept of Mr. Zia, who was the military dictator, and he just take this sport to just prolong his regime. As the Zia regime militarized the structure, its isolation from the people was matched by its acute external dependence. लोगों से तो मिलिट्री कट गई, लोगों का तो अब तल्ला की कोई नहीं रहा. लगता ऐसे था there were two different, state is different, people are different. At that time everyone claiming against, and even if I speak any word against the military at that time, I would have been in the missing person and not sitting here before you giving the lecture and giving you the very interesting story that what happened and what we have seen, and we never expect this. What is happening in KPK and NW and the Balochistan, you are taking it very easy, but it is very serious. It is just to breakage of our body into, and Balochistan is the significant economically the most powerful part of Pakistan is the Balochistan. जब ज़िया साहब इधर से कट गया, then there was definitely, जब आदमी अकेला हो जाए, अपने छोड़ जाएं, definitely he has to depend on some other way, that are the foreigner or the external forces. External forces भी उसी उम्मीद में रहती हैं. Definitely many of the external forces has direct their stakes in Pakistan, so they were in a position to just intervene. They were looking, and as Zia looked here and there to get help from there, they were there to help him out. In the absence of domestic political popularity, कोई उसकी ज़िया की बेस तो नहीं है. आज ज़िया साहब आ जाएं, एक यूनियन काउंसिल का इलेक्शन, it is very difficult for him to win the election. But on the same time, if Bhutto and the opposition party comes, you can imagine what will happen. I need not to, don't think that I am always supporter of the PP. I am always supporter of the democratic government. I am supporter of the Nawaz Sharif. I am supporter of the Gilani. I am supporter of the Zia. I am supporter of all other prime ministers that are elected from the people. Otherwise, any military dictator, even he revolutionized the Pakistan, he has no right to rule this country. His only right is to defend the country. We pay from their by cutting our own bellies. We pay them, and if they are so popular in the nation, they should quit their jobs, they should go into the election, and we will see that how much they are popular in the nation. Now you can see the other military dictator that is under the trial nowadays. If General Musharraf, I can't think that he can win any seat in all over the Pakistan if there is his competition is with the Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, or any high rank PP leader. So this is the story of this, that what I want to suppose that the militarization of the politics has caused Pakistan too much. It sought political, economic and military support from the United States. ज़िया और यूनाइटेड स्टेट जो है वो बहुत करीबी जो है वो दोस्त थे, एंड ही यूज टू मेक प्राउड ऑफ दिस. एट द सेम टाइम लोगों को वो कहते थे ज़िया साहब कि हम डॉलर जो है वो लेते हैं, बिकॉज इन 1979 व्हेन द सोवियत यूनियन इन्वेडेड अफगानिस्तान वी वर ऑन द फ्रंट लाइन ऑफ द front line to fight against them with the dollars of the United States. So Zia got because अकेले हो गए थे Zia साहब, political, economic and military support from the United States. This pushed Pakistan into becoming a front line state in America's Afghan war, which further undermined the civil society. Civil society बिल्लियों की तरह देखती ही रही है 66 ईयर में. डिसीजन कहीं होते रहे, कोई जो है वो उसका जो है वो हल जो है वो नहीं निकला. सिविल सोसाइटी, द मोस्ट सफरर आर यू एंड मी, दैट आर द सिविल सोसाइटी. द बंदर बांट ऊपर होती रही जो है, वो इधर उधर रोटी खाते रहे, बिल्लियां बेचारी जो है वो देखती जो है रखें. बिल्लियां मीन्स द सिविल सोसाइटी एट दैट टाइम. जब ज़िया गॉट हेल्प फ्रॉम डिफरेंट फ्रंट्स, political, economic and military support from the United States, definitely it pushed us as a front line. अब भी हमारे पास यही हुआ है. When America invaded the Afghanistan, we again came in the war or terror. We were the front line, and we have paid a massive price of this, and that cannot be imagined. If I used to calculate on the social, economic, cultural, religion cost, I can't remember. There are so many casualties. Bomb blast, there is no guarantee that at any time where there is a bomb blast. So this is all the fruits of our wrong policies, particularly on the parts of our military rulers. Between 77 and 87, this is the Zia era, with the steady inflow into Pakistan of Afghan refugees. More than 25 lakh Afghan refugees entered in Pakistan in 1979, when there was the Soviet Union invaded the Afghanistan. No doubt that were the Muslim countries, but all over the world, when there are refugees, they are kept under in the camps rather than they are allowing to be the part of the other country. No doubt we have a very, very strong and deep terms with the Himalayan nations of the Afghans, and they were our best friend, but at the same time it was not the policy. Zia did this because Zia knew that many of these refugees will ultimately become the source and the terrorism instrument for them, and ultimately that was proved, and so they were allowed to run havoc in all parts of the country. Now look at the Karachi, there is this phenomena. You can see the history of the kidnapping of the child. This phenomena also exists there. So this is going in one way or the other. It is not getting to the end. So 25 lakh people, influx of the people into the country without any of the registration. This is unique in the history of any country. Two trends have emerged to fuel the crisis of civil society. Civil society के जो है वो टू जो है वो इसमें जो है crisis आए. We will discuss this. What were these crises? We will discuss this, that the illegal armed market आई, माफिया, heroin माफिया आया, जिसने हमारे साथ जो किया वो खुदा की पनाह. And then I will start from further, and the topic will the discussion will go on the fragmentation of the civil society. It's time for me to give you brief summary and say you goodbye for till the next lecture. So from where we started that why there was the polarization of the society. Polarization of the society means that how the state apparatus came dominant over the political system, and it has a very, very long history. From different, we just have seen one look of this, that is the economic growth. Economic growth looks entirely different from other phenomena, but it is extremely and strongly linked with the polarization of the civil society over time. So what starting from the Ayub era, they were just concentrating on the high investment, the heavy investment. They were ignoring the distribution of the wealth and the fruits of this investment. Although the growth were going well, it was not being delivered to the poor population. There was huge gap between the rural and the urban, and ultimately there was the massive explosion of this. After this, the Bhutto regime came, that was also very poor from the economic development. Many other reasons were for this, and ultimately he has to face the crisis. There was high inflation, high polarization of the society, high agitation, and there was the people against the Bhutto, and he has to pay this price. Then Zia came, that period, havoc for the country and on different fronts that we keep on discussing over time. One of the majors are two, that the influx of so many people. He deliberately tried to make own people horror by militarization. So उसने इस तरह की जो है वो बातें की. This came and they just suppressed the nation by this terror, and ultimately what happened? There was alienation between the state and the people. People were thinking themselves something different from the state, and what this led to, there was the confrontation between the state and the civil society that is still going on. So to continue this, Zia's impacts on our civil society and public administration and public policy, wait for the next lecture. I hope you will be hoping anxiously for the next lecture, because I am showing you the mirror of our history and the dictators. So take care. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.